Okay, so this is Amtrak's map. We're actually taking Chicago to Los Angeles. And so we're going to start with a picture of the train, not sort of the train that we took from Chicago, but they're pretty similar. And this is just a stop. They do have stops where you can get off. Other ones where while you get off, you probably won't be able to take the rest of the train. It's too short. But to give you an idea, it's actually 2 floors. They have obviously, like Via, different types of rooms. We had ones that were bedrooms and they were upstairs. Of course, they do have an observation car, but we stuck inside for health reasons. And so just to give you an idea of, this is one of the rooms. So there is a seat that's across from it. So somebody would be traveling forwards with the train, somebody traveling backwards to the train direction. And above it, it's a little bit of a weird picture, but that's above. It comes down and is your very luxurious bunk. Not very luxurious. You do get a bunk, which is nice, and they give you a little cargo net so that you don't fall out of it. And anyway, the thing about these particular bedrooms, these are the bedrooms, you are facing the, you're perpendicular to the train's direction. So you do feel a bit of the bumps. They do have other rooms, which are considered also first class, and they travel along the direction of the train. So you get better sleep, but you have less space. So trade-off here. And you may notice that there is a door with a window. And you can see it here, that there is a hallway. This is a little bit different than Via. Via, you would have a mirror. Here you have a door, and there is a curtain you can draw across to get some privacy. This is the little washing up area, and the door is the bathroom, and it is a toilet and a shower combined. So anyway, the thing you might be able to see, actually off of here, is there's actually one type of room that we were in for one of the trains where there was a door that you could open up, unlock and open up, and the other party were on the other side of ours, so all 4 of us could be together. So anyways, this is a lot of space. This one was a lot of space. Our first one wasn't. A little bit about the food. Cells are not necessarily on every route. You get more of the carb, kind of thing going on here. So these are just examples, some of the food that we have. All right, moving on. Now, the reason I have a picture of this is if you decide to go on Amtrak, bring cleaning supplies. They have a short time between, they do change the bedding, but the inside, we definitely needed to have a lot of wipes. It was certainly quite, it was, I will say dirty. I will say unclean, it was dirty. And we discovered, because Amtrak was also having some difficulties, just like the airlines were, we had a door where the lock didn't work. So we found that a big pen worked well to block that so it wouldn't just fly open in the middle of the night. So, just be prepared for little tricks along the way. Anyway, the sites. Let's get into the sites. That's why everybody's here. The more interesting things. We're starting out in Illinois. This is Old Fort Madison. It was destroyed during the War of 1812. And just notice how lush and green all the vegetation is around. This will change because we're going through those 8 states. The landscape is going to change a lot, okay? So pretty soon we got into the flat fields, and I don't have a lot of pictures of Dodge, I'm sorry, but this is Dodge City. Yes, we got out of Dodge, if you want that bad pun. And it was, of course, famous for all the gunslingers back in the day. Of course, from the rail, you don't see the most picturesque part of town, but we definitely went through Dodge. And this was a different place, I forget exactly where. And it was kind of interesting, they have the new technology that's important, the wind turbine, blade, and the older technology, the train. But the thing that got me, and I couldn't quite get the picture, was the water was from the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe. And if anybody's a Julie Garland fan, you will know that was one of the songs she sang. It was a Johnny Mercer somebody's song. And so for a few days, I kept having the chorus going through my head anyway. So we were on the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe, or what had been. So it was kind of, I like that. Anyway, there are pretty little villages along the way. So we got to see this. And again, notice the topography changed just a little bit. And then we got into rain. Now, we discovered that between apparently June 15th and September 30th, I had to look at the dates, it's the monsoon season in the American Southwest. Now, it's not like you see the tropical monsoons, but it is where all they get a lot of their water. Apparently, between 40 to 75% of the annual rainfall happens during that time. And so, yeah, we got a lot of rain. I'm not going to dwell on that, but it just was, there's a chance of flash flooding. I'll get into explaining a little bit how, if you plan a trip, what you might or may not want to do. Anyway, these are just some of the landscape that we saw. And you can notice a slightly different vegetation, like less, smaller, less, yeah, more buttes and stuff like that. So anyway, I thought it was quite pretty, a lot of the different things. I took a lot of pictures. And I've taken a lot of pictures of raindrops on windshields, but whatever, okay. And so we, as you can notice, getting into some mountains, and then you knew you were in the Southwest, the architecture. So we had a look. Obviously, it's a pretty expensive place, and another very expensive place likely out there. So that was sort of along the way we saw some of those landscapes, okay. Something that was interesting and also very much a theme was irrigation. So you'll notice how dry everything is, very much desert, and then this lush green area, which was irrigated. So some fields out in the desert. And we made our way to Flagstaff. Now, Flagstaff is actually a very high elevation. So we discovered that, you know, if you're going to do something in Flagstaff and you're not used to that elevation, you might just want to moderate kind of the activity that you're going to do, because it is much higher. It's actually higher elevation apparently than Denver. So I did take many pictures of Flagstaff, but this actually, the road that we're not on by crossing it is kind of famous. It's Route 66. So Route 66 went through Flagstaff and a few of the other places we see, and every now and then we saw one. It's just most of my ones from the train didn't really turn up. It was like gone by the time you could get to Route 66. So anyway, Flagstaff, one of the big things about it is the Grand Canyon, if you can follow the tree pointing at it. So I have a few slides from the Grand Canyon. And yes, it is magnificent, but it's very funny. Quite a few of us had that feeling that it feels like almost like a painted backdrop, because it's so vast, it's so big, and where you stand, it's hard to take it in, just the immense nature of that. So it's beautiful, but it's kind of, I don't know how to say the word, but it just doesn't feel completely real, even though you're there. So you know. Anyway, while you're taking in the sights, also look at some of the more, these are a bit closer, like actually some beautiful vegetation, little scenes, and like interesting flowers that they had this poofy stuff that came out. So it was just interesting looking around, and also photobombing animals. That was very funny. It's ready for his close up. So I kind of like this. We were chuckling at the moment. We took the eastern part of the Grand Canyon. It's quite large, and a lot of people go west. We went in the central part, went east, and on the east is this watchtower. And I just have to check my notes because I will not remember the details off the top of my head. This is the Desert View Watchtower. It was designed by an architect who was famous for the Southwest, and Mary Coulter, and she was inspired by the architecture of the First Nations in the area. You do get a great view from here of the Colorado River. Woohoo! So this is, if it's not right at the watchtower, it's very close to it. You can see it winding its way through there. Okay, and also near there, oh, sorry, I was going to say about the Colorado is declining, and again, that whole irrigation thing comes up. This is really hard to see. This is the clubhouse for a golf and you had full greens in the middle of the desert. So it's kind of basically a waste of water as opposed to finding a different way of maybe doing golf that didn't take something so much water. And so there's just ideas of all that irrigation. Near the watchtower is a memorial to this mid-air collision. And I know Ms. John's familiar with those, unfortunately. This happened in 1956. It was very interesting to read a little bit about it because the pilots were responsible for keeping distance from each other. And I'm not certain why they collided, but this collision helped create the formation of the FAA because they discovered maybe we should let the pilots decide where they're flying. Maybe somebody else should be taking on that responsibility. And it started the standards for flight for aviation in the United States. So it's kind of interesting to just take a moment to reflect upon that. I didn't realize that, but yeah, 128 people unfortunately perished in this disaster. So while we were in Flagstaff, we actually rented a truck and car, and we went from Flagstaff to Sedona. Now where that is there on the map. So it doesn't look very far, but it actually changes a lot. You go down, literally go down. We took Highway 89A. If you're ever in the area, I do recommend this. You can take the interstate, it's faster. You see a few sites. This is the scenic route. It's worth it, just to say that. So here are some routes. Again, this is actually going from Flagstaff down to Sedona. And you're going through a national forest, the Coconino National Forest, and you'll notice how the vegetation and the rocks actually change. And Sedona itself is really famous for these red rocks. That's Sedona down there, some of the red rocks in the background. So it is spectacular too. So you're looking down into something at the Grand Canyon, looking up here at Sedona. And yeah, now we just took around, drove around because later that day we were picking the train up again in Flagstaff. And just examples of some of these red rocks. One thing that is interesting is this Chapel of the Holy Cross. And it was built in this Coconino National Forest and had a special permit, actually very Goldwater sited apparently. And so it was built between 1954 and 1956. In 1957, the American Institute of Architects gave it an award. So it is an award-winning one. The patron actually wanted to build this in Budapest, but of course World War II broke out, so she built it in Sedona, which is the area where she was from, or at least around Arizona area. Anyway, and she was inspired by the Empire State Building of all things. Didn't know where to go from there. We didn't go inside, but you can see there is a statue. It looks kind of like a tree, and on its cross, a Christ on its actual tree sculpture. So it's a little bit different. And it was quite lovely to see even from the outside. A bit of a walk up, see quite a few views. Now, we went a little bit south of Sedona. So you sort of saw that there was still some vegetation. It looks even more desert-like because we went to a place called Montezuma's Castle, which is, of course, misnamed. Montezuma was never in this area of the continent at all. This is from the, hopefully I pronounce this correctly, Sinawe people. They built this particular structure, and they were skilled engineers, obviously. It has 20 rooms, and it's about 90 feet up. They, of course, use a system of ladders to go up there. You cannot actually go up here, but it was interesting just to see one of the cave dwellings. And so that's just me zooming in. I know it doesn't look real, but believe me, you can see it up there. And this is just a model that they have because you can no longer go up into this particular area, just so you can see what it was like when they were living inside that cave dwelling. So really interesting place to see. Now, I mentioned about those monsoon rains, okay? If you've ever traveled by rail, you know that the timetable is, you have to be flexible with your timetable because freight goes first. Freight pays all the bills for that, all those rails and stuff. Now, you will notice how late this is. We are stopped off in Flagstaff. We were supposed to get on the train at 8:30 that night. Ended up being 3:30 in the morning. And what happens is they actually stop the train, full stop. We had this coming in and check the bridges to make sure they're not washed out. And so, I mean, it's good that they're stopping and checking the train, but you're delayed very much. So we've discovered maybe you might just want to go to your destination because, you know, you could have been on a nice room, able to sleep instead of opposed to waiting outside, and because the little train station was quite cramped with everybody trying to get on. And or if you don't, then certainly do not plan to catch the next train out of Los Angeles. Take that next day. We did do the next day. I have no real pictures of Los Angeles because by the time we got to LA, we were just really tired. So it would be our hotel room, which isn't exactly scenic. So anyway, just to explain about if you go to the Southwest during June, plan for those stops. So this is just carried from Flagstaff down to LA. It is very much desert. And so it was interesting to see just miles and miles. I don't know how the truck drivers do this because just miles and miles and miles are very much the same. There's some Joshua trees along the tracks. And we did see things like huge solar farms here. We had one that was being set up. So try to see the sites you can. Now, this was interesting rock formation. Somebody who's a geologist maybe could tell something. I really want to find out the nature of this, but this is getting close to something that might be of interest to you. We're getting close because you go across the San Andreas Fault. The city of San Bernardino, California is right on the fault, but it's all covered with vegetation, so you can't actually see the fault, and apparently you just check for colors of rocks or something. And I was trying to figure it out, but I couldn't. So this obviously, there's some sort of earth movement here because all the rocks are going up, which is not normal. So it was just interesting to me. Okay, now we made our way to LA, like I said, stayed overnight, and the next day we got on a train going north up the coast. It's called the Coast Starlight. The one from Chicago to LA was interesting. I mean, it was beautiful. This one, if you want to go on one of those two, this is the one I would suggest going. It's a little bit, there's a lot of scenery. It's not quite so far between things, if that makes sense, okay? So we go up a lot of different places. We actually ended up in Portland, but it does go all the way up to Seattle, if you would like. So you see the typical LA, Southern California, you get piers. You get their really expensive beach houses. I don't know if this is Santa Barbara area, but somewhere around there. You get your beaches. And you can see, this is actually not zoomed in. It was really weird. It felt like you were on the beach, on the train going by. I wouldn't want to be these people, but that's okay. I mean, trains are pretty loud when they go by, but they were chilling. And palm trees. I have a thing for trees, but I didn't realize there's so many different types of palms. I was just fascinated by them. I have a lot of pictures of palm trees because they're also whizzing by. I was fascinated by these ones that look like they have beards. So anyway, you see palm trees, of course. And interesting enough, in Southern California, another common site is oil extraction. So you can see a pump jack there. Actually, there's like a nursery or something with a pump jack on the other side. And those are oil rigs. So you got your beach, you got people at the beach, and you got your oil rig. Interesting combination, so whatever. I'm going to show some pictures of the coast, just going up at just the scenery. Again, a few of the changes that you see. So you get obviously very low, you know, everything. And you can see there's still some very sandy beaches, and then they get a little bit smaller, more rocky, these sheer cliffs, but they're gorgeous. And you can see a lot of the rocks, and it just gets progressively more and more rugged as we go along. And so that's just an example for that. We did get into some mist, so it's not actually, this is not cloud, this is actually mist as we got further north. Okay. So pelicans going by, I know we're familiar with pelicans, but it was nice to see them flying by. And then we get also into the interior. And so this is more the farm area. So I thought this is really interesting. It kind of reminded me of Saskatchewan, actually, with maybe the hills being a little taller, because it just reminded me maybe a little bit more vegetation, you could argue. So there's a ranch. So again, the hills in the back maybe a little craggier than here, but still it felt very much like, almost like home, which I was not expecting that far south from here. So who knew? But then you would get big jagged things. And again, on this one, you go across the San Andreas Fault again. So you get some geological things happening. Again, somebody would be able to tell you what happened there, but not me. And just an idea of that spectacular vista that you see. Now, it's a little bit different. And if your person has to be like, there's each of the vistas were quite interesting in and of themselves. They were very different. So sometimes you had the big open spaces with booths and different stuff, right? Sometimes you had all the water and the beach and the rocks and stuff. And this one, of course, these hills, you can't tell from a picture just the kind of epic scale, right? Anyway, you get a sense of the epic scale when you can see the cars down there on the highway. We also, there's quite a few interstates that we were kind of near during different parts of our trip, also from Chicago all the way down. Sometimes we have a more scenic view. So this is where I was going to say, especially on this coast, the interstate did not get as spectacular view as we were. This is us looking out the other side. It's like, ha, 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 we get to see the good stuff. Anyway, so I mentioned about irrigation. So much of where we went in like that more central northern part in the interior of California, we saw. So again, very dusty, dirty, looking. And you got the irrigation, and then you had rows and rows and rows of things. And I know for me personally, I'm still pondering how much do we want to support this, knowing me, because of the toll it's taken on the water down there, and they're in drought and have been for a number of years. So it was sobering just to see. And then we get into the mountains. Now, I'm a mountain person. If somebody says, let's go to Banff, I'm like, yes, when? So, or one of the other national parks up there. So I am, anyway, the mountains, and you see your typical kind of mountain scenes, which are pretty, I have problems trying to get this, so it's out of focus. This is snow. So we were up high enough, we still had snow. Just to give you an idea, it was very hard to get it to focus on the stupid snow. So that was the closest I could get. One thing that surprised me, because I didn't want to read ahead, I kind of wanted to be surprised by what I saw, was there are a couple of really large bodies of water that you go across. One is Shasta Lake in Northern California. And apparently it's one of the largest reservoirs in California. And this is, I believe, Klamath Lake in Oregon. And this one was massive, just massive, massive, massive. I haven't been looking quite at my notes, so let me just see how big it is. Oh, it doesn't have it, but it's the largest body of water in Oregon by the surface area. It's not very deep, but it's quite immense. And so, just to give you an idea, again, you can't really tell the scope because there's very little in there to get that sense. You can see, again, more pelicans, these times the white pelicans, and the heron, so you get some wildlife. It's just wonderful to see. And of course, now we got more geology things. I'm into rocks, what can I say? I need to take a geology course, so I know. This is quite obviously a volcano. You have quite a few volcanoes along the way. And I really want to figure out this particular volcano because it had more than one peak on it. And so I'm kind of curious about what happened here. And this one looks like it maybe blew its top, literally. And so anyway, we got some different geology things which are interesting to view as you're going along. And then you see interesting things, no less about this. There's a cone-shaped building or structure in the interior, and I forget if it's Northern California, Southern Oregon, but it was just really, really interesting to see these unusual structures. And we get to Portland. Now, Portland, I should take a picture of the train station. I was a little bit floored by the train station because if you would like a sense of the history of train travel in the United States, Portland's train station kind of has that right now. This is their luggage system. There is a shelf. They do actually drive in with the baggage cart. The person unloads it and puts it on the shelf. That's your luggage pickup. So it's not the usual turnstile. Most of them have turnstiles like at the airport. Portland did it, which for such a large city, it was like, that's a surprise. But like I said, you get a feeling of sort of how that was historically. So Washington Park in Portland, I flew out the next day in the afternoon. So I only got to see really one thing. This is the only one thing you see in Portland. I do recommend this. This was definitely worth it. As you can see, formed in 1871. Now it is over 410 acres and has more than 15 miles of trails. The Portland Zoo's in it. There's a forestry center. There's a whole bunch of things in this gigantic park. And you can see that there's just beautiful flowers. Here are some of the trails. Some ideas of the usual things. They have even charming bathrooms. That's the bathroom, at least from the outdoors. I didn't go into it, but I was just like, what? This is the bathroom? This looks like a little kiosk type of thing, but no, very charming. It has a Japanese garden. Unfortunately, when I was there, it was only open to members and I couldn't really stick around long enough to go in when they were open, but my family went there, so it was very lovely indeed. They also have the Oregon Holocaust Memorial, and this was quite a touching place. So as you can see, it's actually quite big, but they have these plaques with some sayings from survivors. They actually have soil from let's see, 6 different camps where people were killed, like Treblinka, Auschwitz, and whatever, to put into this. And they also have objects. It's hard to explain how it is set up because it's a really big thing. So some of the quotes were really touching to read through them. Like this one says, "I had a childhood in which there was no mother, no father, no brother, no sister, no grandparents, no cousins, no aunts, no uncles. To this day, I am filled with envy when I see children walking hand in hand with their parents." So it's pretty heartbreaking when you think about that. And this one says, as you maybe can see, "The fear has never left me." So, you know, these are survivors. This was dedicated 2004. So all those years later, still the fear hasn't left. As I said, quite large. And so they have these objects that represent the everyday life that was just left behind. And of course, they have very touching this child's shoe. It's all cast. They have it toys on a bench, a doll on a bench, stuff like this. So, you know, taking a moment there to reflect. And here's the maybe pièce de résistance of the Washington Park. This is the International Rose Test Garden. And so I had to look up, was started in 1917. There are apparently 11 sites throughout the United States to test roses, and Portland has one of them. There are over 500 varieties of roses and over 7,000 bushes. So just an idea of sort of how it's laid out. There's lots of different things. You can take a look at least at 21 inventory. Just massive to look through. And so just everywhere. Beautiful roses. Of course, I had to take a few close-ups, see some unusual ones. I thought this one was quite unusual, kind of vintage, I guess, whatever you want to say. And this one was unusual because if you notice, the same bush has yellow and pink and like pinky yellow, like it just had. So I thought that was quite unusual. Some of them do have QR codes, so you can scan them if you would like to be out there. It was kind of hot. I needed to get back and finish packing, so I didn't stop, but there are quite a few places where you can learn a bit more about the roses. And here's now me getting ready to, I flew back. I was on a little prop plane. I mentioned about volcanoes. This is one of the very famous ones in Portland, Mount Hood. So you can see it from the airport, and this is up through the plane. So it's a little bit weird colored, but there's Mount Hood. And Portland also has another very famous volcano. And so I took pictures. This is approaching it, and notice all the snow on it. This is the end of June, so you know it's quite high up. And I don't know if anybody can maybe guess which volcano this is, because you notice the top is gone, quite a bit's down there, and quite a bit of lava flow. This is Mount St. Helens. So I flew by Mount St. Helens. I was a little freaked out a bit, I will admit. But anyway, and we ended our adventure by flying into Vancouver. Fortunately, all the travels after that were pretty okay. So I didn't have quite the luggage and whatever. So I probably went through that a little quickly, but that is a bit about the US by train.